My name is Elowyn Harper, and I am 70 years old. I've spent more than half my life carving out a life of my own. Yet even now, the weight of 15 years of absence from my daughter's family gatherings presses against me. The day began like any other Sunday in Charleston. Sunlight spilling over the marble counters of my kitchen, the faint scent of brewed coffee lingering in the air. I was organizing my notes for a new community project when the sudden chime of the front doorbell startled me, making my heart lurch despite the quiet I had grown accustomed to. No one had come without warning for years. I hesitated for a moment, my hand resting on the brass doorknob, remembering every holiday I had been erased, every birthday ignored. Each one had left an invisible scar, each absence a silent accusation of my unworthiness. I exhaled, steadying myself, and pulled open the door. The street beyond was empty, yet my instincts told me something had changed. My eyes scanned the driveway, but it was only the sunlight dancing across the neatly trimmed hedges. The familiar calm of my neighborhood. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the tension loosen slightly but not vanish. 15 years had taught me patience, taught me to survive on my own terms. Yet something in the back of my mind insisted that the past was creeping closer. I returned to my kitchen, lifting the coffee cup to my lips, tasting the bitterness that mirrored memory itself. And as I gazed out the window at the quiet street, I couldn't shake the feeling that the stillness wouldn't last long. Soon, I would have to confront what 15 years of silence had left unspoken. I often return in my mind to the early years of Maurice's life, when the house buzzed with activity, and yet somehow, I always felt apart from it. She was a bright, determined child, her curiosity sparkling in every movement. And Daniel, her future husband, was already a steady presence, helping her with puzzles and reading aloud in the living room. I watched them from the hallway, a smile on my face, but a quiet ache in my chest that no one seemed to notice. In those days, the subtle exclusions began almost imperceptibly. Family dinners were dominated by conversations that skipped over me, invitations for outings that never arrived. Even when I tried to participate, my presence was overlooked, my opinions brushed aside with polite nods. I remember the sting of seeing Maurice's milestones celebrated with exuberance, while my contributions and sacrifices were quietly forgotten. Birthdays, school achievements, even her first recital, my applause was there, but my name rarely spoken, as if I were a shadow in my own home. As Maurice grew, Daniel's support became more evident, their laughter filling the spaces where I had once hoped to belong. My attempts to connect felt increasingly out of step. And slowly, a distance formed that neither time nor words could bridge. I watched them together, proud yet painfully aware of the gulf that had opened between us. Each smile I gave carried a hidden weight, a reminder of years of being overlooked, of my love acknowledged only in silence. Even as an adult, Maurice and Daniel built lives I could admire from afar but seldom touch. Phone calls became infrequent, visits rare. The house I had once hoped would be full of family warmth now seemed like a quiet museum of memories I could not reclaim. And yet, through all the distance and neglect, my love for her remained unbroken, stubbornly persistent. It was a love that had learned to endure absence, that had grown resilient in the shadows, waiting for a moment when the past and the present might finally collide. By the time I reached my 40s, I had come to understand that waiting for recognition from those who had consistently overlooked me was futile. I began to invest my energy elsewhere, channeling the ache of exclusion into concrete action. Small victories became milestones, balancing budgets with meticulous care. tackling home repairs on my own, and slowly transforming my modest savings into property investments. Each calculated step reminded me that my life could be shaped by my own hands, not by the approval I had long sought from others. I found a neglected townhouse in a quiet Charleston neighborhood, the kind of place people passed without a second glance. To me, it was more than walls and floors. It was a blank canvas. I spent weeks scraping away the years of neglect, sanding floors, patching plaster, and painting walls until the space felt like an extension of myself. Each room I restored became a testament to my patience and resilience, proof that I could build something enduring from what had been forgotten. Alongside my work, I pursued opportunities to strengthen my financial independence. I enrolled in evening courses, studied market trends, and learned the intricacies of property management. When deals succeeded, the satisfaction was quiet but profound. A confirmation that I was capable, that the years of silence and marginalization had not diminished me. Through it all, I kept a careful balance between ambition and the small joys that sustained me: a Sunday walk along the cobblestone streets, an afternoon spent with a well-worn book, or a phone call with a friend who truly listened. With each success, however modest, I felt a little more like the person I had always been capable of becoming: strong, self-reliant, and determined. The shadows of the past remained, but they no longer dictated the course of my life. Chapter 4. Achievements in Solitude. Years of perseverance had transformed the quiet townhouse into the foundation of something far larger than I had ever imagined. By my 50s, Charleston knew me not as the woman overshadowed by family expectations, but as a determined entrepreneur who could see potential where others saw only decay. I purchased older properties in neglected neighborhoods, restored them, and in doing so, provided affordable housing for families who needed it most. Each completed project carried a sense of purpose that no praise from my daughter or son-in-law could replicate. I began to focus on youth in the community, creating scholarships for students who, like me once, had to navigate obstacles with little guidance. I funded workshops in art and architecture, mentoring teenagers who had talent but lacked resources. Their faces, lit with the thrill of discovery, reminded me why the work mattered far more than recognition. When one young woman wrote to thank me for helping her attend college, I felt a quiet triumph, more profound than any compliment from blood relatives could offer. Daniel occasionally reached out during these years, checking in on Maris, but our conversations remained surface level, polite but never deep. I found my satisfaction elsewhere, in the tangible results of my efforts, in the communities that welcomed me, and in the lives I could touch directly. I was no longer waiting for validation from those who had long withheld it. With each project, my confidence grew, negotiating contracts, managing crews, and designing spaces that fostered light and warmth. I realized I had developed skills and resilience that no family scorn could diminish. At night, after walking the quiet streets of Charleston, I would stand on the porch of a completed house, watching the lights come on in windows I had restored, and feel a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with my daughter or her family. In solitude, I had built more than homes. I had built a reputation, a community, and a life shaped entirely by my choices. And as the years passed, the thought of recognition from Maris or Daniel became increasingly irrelevant, a distant echo compared to the pride I carried quietly in my own heart. It was an ordinary Tuesday when I received the call from Maris, her voice tight with strain and exhaustion. She explained, carefully choosing each word, that the divorce had drained her emotionally and financially. Daniel was trying to manage the household, but the tension between them had grown unbearable. I listened, the years of distance between us pressing into the silence, and felt the familiar ache of longing tempered by the lessons I had learned to protect my heart while remaining compassionate. I asked about the children, hearing their chatter in the background, the brief laughter that betrayed the stress they too felt. I could picture them, Maris's son and daughter, navigating adolescence under the weight of change, their father absent in spirit even when present in the room. I wanted to rush to them, to offer help, but I hesitated, remembering the years I had been kept at a distance. Pride, hard-won and fiercely guarded, held me back. Instead, I listened, offering measured words and guidance where I could. I reminded her gently of her resilience, and that though challenges could feel overwhelming, she had navigated them before. I thought of all the quiet lessons I had learned myself, that strength often revealed itself not in dramatic gestures, but in the patient persistence of daily choices. As I hung up the phone, I stared out at the Charleston skyline, the sunlight bouncing off the rooftops, and realized the inevitability of change. The past could not be rewritten, yet the present offered an opportunity to engage cautiously, to be present without compromising the boundaries I had fought so hard to maintain. Somewhere in the delicate balance of empathy and self-preservation, I sensed a door opening, a possibility of reunion that did not demand surrender. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of anticipation, tempered with caution. Whatever was coming, I would meet it on my own terms, with the wisdom of decades and the quiet power that had carried me through so many years of exclusion. The sun had begun its slow descent over Charleston when the sharp chime of the front doorbell shattered the quiet of my home. I set down the notebook I had been reviewing for a community project and froze, hand lingering on the edge of the counter. The sound was ordinary enough, yet it carried a weight I hadn't felt in years, a prelude to something I had long suspected might come, yet hoped would never arrive. I approached the door cautiously, heart thrumming with an odd mixture of anticipation and guarded resolve. Through the glass, I saw the familiar outlines: Maris, her shoulders slightly hunched from months of stress, Daniel standing beside her, his expression measured but strained, and, behind them, the two grandchildren, wide-eyed and curious. Seemingly unaware of the tension in the air, a single exhale escaped me, though it did little to ease the coil of anxiety tightening my chest. I opened the door slowly, letting my eyes sweep over their faces, noting every subtle shift, the flicker of guilt in Daniel's eyes, the hesitant smile Maris forced, the innocent curiosity of the children who had never known the full weight of our family's past. Their presence brought a flood of memories, the milestones I had missed, the holidays spent alone, the countless invitations that had never arrived. And yet, beneath it all, I felt a quiet, resolute calm. I had built my life carefully, brick by brick, and no visit could unsettle the foundation I had created for myself. Maris spoke first, her voice trembling slightly. "Mom, we need to talk." I nodded once, a small, controlled motion, stepping aside to allow them entrance. The grand foyer, with its polished walnut floors and sunlight streaming through glass panels, felt impossibly spacious compared to the years of emotional distance that had separated us. As they crossed the threshold, I observed every detail: Daniel's careful movements, the children's hesitant steps, Maris' tightly pressed lips. The tension was palpable, a living thing pressing against the walls I had maintained for so long. I poured coffee without a word, letting the simple act anchor me to the present. My gaze swept over them again, calm yet unwavering, as I prepared to meet the reckoning that 15 years of absence had quietly been building toward. For a moment, The air between us hung thick with expectation. Neither side spoke, yet volumes of unsaid words filled the space. And in that silence, I recognized the truth I had carried for decades. The past could not be erased, but I could control the way I met it. Today, I would stand on my own terms, ready to confront the family who had ignored me for years. We settled into the living room, the sunlight through the tall windows casting long patterns on the polished floors. I offered Maris and Daniel seats on the couch, while the grandchildren perched on the edge of the armchairs, fidgeting with their backpacks as if sensing the weight in the air. The room was quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of shoes and the soft hiss of the coffee brewing. Maris cleared her throat first, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's nice to see you," she said, her words carefully measured. Daniel nodded, glancing at the children, who were wide-eyed and curious, their hands clasped tightly in their laps. I nodded in return, letting my calm exterior mask the storm of emotion I felt. 15 years of absence had sharpened my ability to remain composed. Even as memories pressed in from every direction, I observed them closely, the subtle shifts in posture, the hesitant glances, the way Daniel's fingers drummed lightly against the arm of the chair. Maris' eyes flicked toward me repeatedly, searching for a reaction, a sign that I would welcome them as if nothing had passed. But I remained still, letting them adjust to the reality of my presence without the comfort of assumed forgiveness. The grandchildren whispered to one another, leaning toward their mother, their innocence contrasting sharply with the tension threading the room. I caught snippets of their soft voices, a question about school projects, a comment about the sunny weather outside. Their curiosity and lack of pretense reminded me that the past had shaped our interactions, but it had not yet defined them. I poured coffee, the sound a grounding ritual, and offered it to Daniel and Maris. As they accepted, I felt the subtle shift in energy, the acknowledgement that I was in control, that this encounter would unfold on my terms. And while the room hummed with cautious conversation, I remained aware of every detail, every movement, and every unspoken question, knowing that this fragile first meeting was only the beginning of the reckoning that had been quietly building for years. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sunlight fall across the table, and finally spoke. "For 15 years, I have been absent from every milestone you deemed important: birthdays, holidays, achievements. Yet I was never considered part of them." My voice was calm, measured, but carried the weight of decades of neglect. Maris shifted in her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Daniel's jaw tightened subtly, betraying the discomfort he tried to mask. "I spent those years building something for myself," I continued, my eyes sweeping across the room, catching the children's curious gazes. "I invested in properties, restored homes that had been left to rot, created opportunities for young people in our community who had no one to guide them. I did all of this without support, without acknowledgement, and certainly without your attention." Maris's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mom, we didn't realize," she began, but I raised a hand gently, cutting off the excuse before it could take shape. "It doesn't matter what you realized. What matters is that I learned to survive without your approval. I learned that my worth was not dependent on your acknowledgement, nor was my life incomplete without your presence." Daniel's gaze flickered downward, the polite mask of composure slipping for a fraction of a second. The grandchildren whispered softly to each other, sensing the tension yet too young to fully grasp its magnitude. I let the silence linger, allowing them to absorb the weight of what I had lived with, the years of invisibility that had shaped me into the person sitting before them. "I will not be erased again," I said, my voice firm. "I am 70 years old, and I have built a life of meaning, independence, and purpose. I will continue to choose where I invest my time, my energy, and my love. That choice does not include being diminished by past neglect. The room felt heavy, charged with unspoken emotions. Maris' shoulders slumped. Daniel exhaled quietly, and even the children straightened as if sensing the gravity of their elder's discomfort. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted. The past had finally met the present, and I had made it unmistakably clear that it would not define my future. The room remained thick with silence after my declaration. Maris looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously in her lap. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes flicking toward the floor, avoiding mine. The grandchildren, sensing the tension, leaned closer to one another but said nothing, their wide eyes taking in the strained expressions of the adults around them. I sat upright, my posture relaxed yet commanding, letting them feel the weight of my calm. 15 years of exclusion had taught me the value of patience, of letting actions speak louder than words. I had built a life that did not require validation from those who had withheld it, and now the evidence of that life, my independence, my work, my community stood between us as an undeniable force. Maris finally lifted her gaze, a flicker of shame crossing her features. Mingled with a hint of remorse she seemed unprepared to voice. Daniel exhaled slowly, as though the truth of my words had pressed him down, reminding him of the years he had silently witnessed her absence, yet said nothing. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitter warmth anchor me, and observed them without comment. The children fidgeted slightly, sensing a shift in the room, a subtle change in power and recognition. For the first time, the imbalance of the past, the neglect, the indifference, the unspoken dismissals was evident to all present. I could see it etched in their faces, a quiet acknowledgement of truths they had long ignored. Yet there was no apology forthcoming. I did not need words. The weight of their discomfort, the unspoken recognition of my endurance and achievements, was proof enough that the past had finally met its reckoning. I stood slowly, the subtle scrape of my chair against the hardwood marking a shift in the room. Maris and Daniel remained seated, the silence between us heavy with unsaid words and the weight of years. I took a deep breath, letting the calm I had cultivated over decades fill me, and looked at them one final time. My choices have carried me this far, I said evenly, and from here on, I will continue to surround myself with those who value presence, respect, and genuine care. That choice is mine alone. The grandchildren glanced up at me, uncertain but attentive. Sensing the gravity in my tone, I gestured toward the door, and they understood without words. There would be no extended arguments, no lingering appeals. 15 years of absence had taught me the limits of familial obligation when it was absent in practice. I would not allow old patterns to dictate my peace. As they gathered their things and moved toward the exit, I felt an unexpected lightness. The tension that had hung over the room for hours began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet sense of authority and self-possession. I had confronted the past without compromise. And now, with the door closed behind them, the future felt expansive. Later that evening, I sat surrounded by my friends and colleagues at a modest dinner, laughter filling the spaces that had once been heavy with regret and distance. We toasted quietly, not for wealth or recognition, but for the enduring connections built on mutual respect and shared experience. Here, in the warmth of chosen bonds, I felt fully at home, embraced not for obligation, but for the life I had lived, the choices I had made, and the loyalty I had earned. for the first time in years. The notion of family rested not on blood, but on those who had truly been present, and it felt complete.